This year marks the 40th anniversary of the greatest sequel in cinematic history. Well, maybe not the best, but it's a bloody good one. Suffice it to say, Rocky 1 is the most critically acclaimed out of the franchise. The Rocky character proved to the world that he could go the distance with a world heavyweight champion, and also proved that
I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood.
So what will Rocky do in this next chapter of his life? And is there a story to tell behind the scenes? These are my insights into Rocky 2.
You want to see what that thing does? Press the red button down at the bottom.
What, this one?
Whoa!
Holy smokes.
What later became a tradition of the Rocky movies, the beginning of the film shows a recap of the end of the previous.
Ain't gonna be no rematch. Ain't gonna be no rematch.
Later in the hospital, Apollo has a sudden change of heart.
Does that mean there'll be a rematch? I said any place, any time, man. Can you hear?
Due to a bad eye, Rocky attempts multiple new careers, which ultimately fail. Eventually, he returns to Mickey's gym for a small job. Meanwhile, Apollo continues to antagonize Rocky to get him back in the ring for a rematch. With his bad eye and Adrian's disapproval, he was fundamentally at odds with himself. Eventually, Apollo awoke Rocky's Eye of the Tiger. So he and Mickey finally agreed to accept Apollo's challenge. Adrian then falls into a coma due to complications giving birth to their son. After what seems weeks, Adrian finally wakes up and the first thing she utters is,
"Win."
Now this is enough to make any man's adrenaline go through the roof. He begins his training, which then brings us to the fight and the climax of the film. It is without doubt that Rocky achieves the most milestones in this installment. He manages to muster up enough courage and romantically proposes to Adrian.
If you wouldn't mind marrying me too much.
He then has your typical extravagant Italian wedding, where 1 million people attend. It's hard to imagine the man that we saw in the first film being a father. A man who breaks thumbs for a living and can't even afford a telephone.
Do you have a phone?
No, I ain't got no phone. I'll call your brother if that's the problem.
Yo, Paulie, your sister's with me.
But in this chapter, he becomes Papa Stallion. And in this scene, Baby Stallion is actually Sly's real-life son, Sergio. For those who are unfamiliar with the film series, you'd assume that Rocky was the heavyweight champion from the first film. In actual fact, he lost the first fight with Apollo. And he only just beats him in this film. They both fall in the last round, and Rocky just manages to get up in the last second, winning the World Heavyweight Championship for the first time. We learn in this film that Rocky is uneducated.
What'd you think going into the last round?
I don't know, that I should have stayed in school or something.
Even to the extent that he can't read.
You cost us thousands of dollars because you can't read.
During the period that Adrian is in a coma, Rocky uses it as an opportunity to read to her. He continues to read until he's fluent. There is some real cringe-worthy comedy in the other films.
I feel like I could eat nails now.
You know, I never tried them things, you know.
What are you talking about?
The snails, I never had them, you know. I see them in the garden, but I never want to eat them.
I didn't say anything about snails. I said nails. Nails.
Oh, yeah.
In my opinion, the best comedy is in Rocky 2.
Fear. How's about investing in condominiums? It's safe here.
Condominiums.
Yeah, condominiums.
I never used them.
There seems to be this running joke between Rocky and Paulie throughout the series.
This, you gave me a lousy stinking X-Lax watch. This.
I don't need a watch.
I got a watch. You gave me a watch.
But
I don't need a goddamn watch.
yo, Paulie.
I got a watch. I got 2 watches.
I never really watched Rocky 2 thoroughly until I was an adult. And it wasn't until recent years I noticed he actually buys the watch in Rocky 2.
Then you need a good watch. I'll tell you what, I want to get one for Paulie too, okay? We'll take these.
And thus the running joke began.
Oh, hey, thanks a lot, Paul. And you don't have to thank me for the watch either.
In the press conference scene, Rocky delivers some more comedy gold.
Rocky, what do you think about the fight taking place in the Spectrum?
I'm very happy about that.
Why?
Well, it's only about 10 minutes from my house.
Rocky, got anything derogatory to say about the champ?
Derogatory. Yeah, he's great.
He wouldn't have the faintest idea what that word meant.
I'm gonna drop him like a bad habit.
Rocky, your pay for the fight is very substantial. What are you going to do with the money?
Well, the first thing I gotta do is I gotta pay the rent, you know. And then, well, I made this list on the way over. I was just thinking of things to do. I'd like to get a couple of hats and maybe a motorcycle and a couple of quarts of perfume for Adrian. She likes to smell good. And some Muppet toys, you know, Ernie and Big Bird and Frog. What's his name? Kermit or something like that? And I thought maybe a statue for the church, and I think a snow cone machine for you, Paul. You like snow cones, don't you?
Now, that joke won't make sense unless you're paying close attention to detail. You have to rewind back to an earlier scene. He loves it. Oh, and he just chucks it away. Perhaps Rocky should have made a better decision in Rocky IV. With Rocky I director John Avildsen being tied up with another project, he was unable to return to direct the sequel. As well as writing and starring, many were thinking that Sly was attempting to bite off more than he could chew. Rocky II was going to be only his second time directing, and his first, Paradise Alley, fell flat at the box office. So the pressure was on. Although many had doubts, the producers, however, knew that this was Sly's baby, and had total faith that he could pull it off. Upon production of the film, in an intense bench press competition with Franco Columbu, Sly tore his right pectoral muscle so badly that he needed 160 stitches and an artificial ligament to connect his chest to his right arm. This caused a great problem for the filming of the fight scene, as Sly wasn't able to throw right hook punches. So they decided to change Rocky's boxing style from his traditional southpaw to orthodox. In the story, Mickey had hoped that this would throw Apollo off guard. Behind the scenes, this alleviated strain on Sly's right arm, and as a result, it introduced some strategy and made the fight more unique. Stallone was so broke before making the first Rocky that he had to sell his beloved dog, Butkus. Once Rocky I was green-lit and he received some funds, he returned to the guy he sold him to and bought him back. Butkus appears in both films, but it was his last appearance in Rocky II. Sadly, Butkus died of a heart attack in 1981. Although it didn't make quite as much as the other sequels, it still made a whopping $200 million at the box office on a mere $7 million budget. Interesting to compare that with another boxing film that came out a year later, in 1980, which only made $23 million on an $18 million budget. According to Rocky producer Irwin Winkler, they really wanted to make the movie Raging Bull for some time, but the studios weren't interested. They used the success of Rocky II for them to greenlight Raging Bull. So if it wasn't for Rocky II, there'd be no Raging Bull. The moral to this film can be encapsulated in one sentence: that it is more than just going the distance, it's about winning and personal triumph. It's full of the quintessential iconic Rocky moments. My guess is that if you've clicked on this video, chances are you've seen this movie. But if you haven't seen it in a while, I recommend giving it another viewing. If you've never seen it, well, I guess you don't have to. Just know that if you're after a gift for your brother-in-law, try to avoid watches and just stick to robots and snow cone machines.